Thank you, Michael. So, hi, everybody. I'm Carol Kauffman, founder of the Institute of Coaching with Margaret Moore and Susan David. And I am here with Michael Bungay Stanier, who is just a wonderful human first. He also wrote probably the way you know him, which is the book, The Coaching Habit, that has sold rather freakishly, as Michael says,
It is.
over 1 million copies, and then a bunch of other books. And we're talking today about his most recent book, How to Work with Almost, which I love that, anyone. But Michael has a number of hats. He's a real educator and teacher. He also is a founder of an organization. And Michael, as we talk about your 5 keystone questions to help you how to work with almost anyone, I'd love to bring in some of your own story as
Sure.
well as a founder, because a lot of our leadership coaches are also founders or are working with founders. So we'll feel free.
I
Do
will.
you want to just kind of give us a little bit about, you talk about relationships as safe, vital, and repairable.
Yeah,
Let's start with that and then go to the questions that you
sure.
work with for people.
Yeah, the starting point, Carol, is um, a realization of the bleedingly obvious, for me anyway, which is just how significant our working relationships are in terms of our happiness and our success.
Yeah.
Work gets done through people, but also just our general spirit is so affected by the quality of the working relationships that we have. Because we've all had those moments where we've been in really great working relationships and we're like, I love this. I love how I'm
Mhm. Mhm.
called forth. I love how I'm challenged. I love how I grow. I love how we laugh. You can feel the better version of yourself emerging and evolving, and you can feel the quality of the work being kind of at the edge of what you're capable with. It's amazing. And
Mm.
you probably had those working relationships at the other end of the spectrum where you're like, maybe the person is, a sociopath, but often it's just like, we just cannot figure it out. We cannot get this going. There's always sand in the gears. We're always struggling against each other. And just what I ask people what the language is around these relationships, and the word that kind of sums it most of it up is kind of diminishing. You feel that
Mm.
that shrinking. You lose confidence, and you lose your sense of competence, and you lose your sense of courage and bravery, and you kind of become that smaller, more timid, more nervous version of yourself. And I'm
Mm.
like,
It's very powerful, by the way, what you're saying.
well, it's I mean, I can look at my 30, 40. How old am I? Too old to say 35 years of working, and I'm like, I've got people on the whole spectrum, people at this end, people at this end, lots of people in the middle. And what I
Mm.
realized, Carol, is most of my working life, I've just crossed my fingers and hoped for the best. And kind of gone, if I work harder, maybe that will make the working relationships better. And actually, maybe a little bit, but mostly I'm like, what if we were more active about shaping our working relationships? What if we took responsibility to say, can I
Mm.
make this as good as I can be? And that
Yeah.
comes to your question, which is like, what is the best possible relationship? Because obviously not every relationship is going to be amazing, but every relationship has the potential to be the best version of itself. And
Mhm.
for me,
Yeah.
there's these 3 qualities: there's safe and vital and repairable. So let me unpack those.
Sorry. Yes.
Safe. And it's a good place to start because it's the one that we most recognize, because we've talked about psychological safety for, I'm not sure when Amy Edmondson first kind of really started bringing that work into the world and making it popular. But now there's a ton of research around the power of psychological safety. It's in the vernacular of lots of organizations. You have people like Google doing Project Oxygen and Project Aristotle talking about teams and managers, and psychological safety is woven and baked through all of that stuff. So people get psychological safety. And I think it's one of the great developments of the last 10 years is how much more nuanced we are around what that means and what's required for us to build psychological safety. But
Yes.
for me, I don't want just psychological safety. I've had relationships that have felt safe and a bit flat and a bit I'm going to say boring even. I'm like, I want more than that. And so that's why I came up with the idea of vitality, safe and
Mm-hmm.
vital. Or, as somebody said to me the other day, which I love, psychological bravery.
Yes. Yes.
So how do
Mm-hmm.
you push and provoke and challenge and step out to the edge of what you know and what your confidence and your competence is? How do you find that place where you know, the idea that you unlock your greatness by working on the hard things? Well, how do you get there?
Mm-hmm.
And there's this dance, obviously, this tension between safe and vital, safe and brave. And you're
Right.
looking to go, how do we find the best possible
Mm-hmm.
combination for you and me? One that
Mm-hmm.
is both safe, but also challenge us to step out to the edge of who we are and what we know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then the third element is just to say, look, every working relationship goes off the rails at some stage. You know, sometimes it's an explosion, but more often it's a dent or a crack or a bend or something. And in reading the people who kind of work in relationships all the time, kind of more in kind of romantic relationships, people like Esther Perel or Terry Real or Dan Siegel or John Gottman, you see a
Mm-hmm.
theme coming through all of their work, which is like, can it be repaired? Because if it's repairable, the relationship's more likely to last and thrive. But also,
Mm-hmm.
most of us are pretty bad at repairing relationships. You know, something happens and we're like, oh, I'll just pretend it hasn't happened, or I'll just hold on to the resentment, or I'll just kind of wave my hands around and blow up, but nothing gets fixed so much about it. So those became the three attributes: safe, vital, and repairable.
Mm-hmm. Now I'm going to pick up on something that that you've just said that I think is really powerful for us to be aware of as coaches, which I loved what you were saying about what's the impact, the impact of sort of diminishing and feeling
Yeah,
smaller. Um, I'm really fascinated with that. And there's some very powerful research that they've done, which is, here's the negative relationship and there's the outcome often of being diminished. And what is it in the middle? And I think what it is and why it's so important is it can change your relationship with yourself.
mm,
And basically, when you're saying, how to work with almost anyone, an end result of that is everyone in that relationship feeling more like they can be their 10 of 10 version of themselves
that's right.
rather than their 2 of 10. So I know that was a side point for you, but I just thought that was very
Yeah,
powerful.
it's, you know, as part of the research around this, I came across a term you probably have heard of, but I hadn't heard of before, which is, I think, covering or coverage. And this was research done by Deloitte, which is like, covering is, to what extent do you feel you can be your full self at work?
Yeah.
And the research was with young people, and they were like, it was a huge percentage, like 70 or 80% felt they couldn't be their full version of themselves at work. So
Mhm.
you're constantly uh, code switching, as people of color will sometimes call it, which is like, I need to figure out the mask to wear and the way of being in this different context.
Mhm.
And this idea that, what if you could bring the best version of yourself that you would like to bring to work? How beneficial that would
Mhm.
that be for you? And also, what a gift that is to the people with whom you work and the organization with whom you work. Um,
Yes.
but but it takes some work to do that. And part of the idea of this book is
Mhm.
that it's a business book around process, around, here's how you have a keystone conversation about how we work together,
Yes.
not just what we're
Yes.
working on. But it's kind of a self-growth, self-development book snuck in there as well, because there's
Totally.
exercises around how you figure out how to talk about who you are. Because until you know the language about who you are, how could you possibly be that?
Yes, that's exactly right. At our conference, we had a speaker a while ago who talked about the more you can articulate something, the more you can do it. But I'd like to switch to the 5 questions you have. They're really, really remarkable, and you package them in fun ways.
Thanks, Carol.
One question is as you described, the amplify question.
Right.
If you were a 10 out of 10, the relationship was a 10 out of 10. And then the steady question, which you'll go into. But I love you have the good date and the bad date
Yeah.
conversation, and then how to repair things. So those are your 5 questions.
Yeah.
We have about 20 minutes. Let's help our leadership coaches and just do kind of a little bit on each one.
Perfect.
So
So, Carol, your job, if you wouldn't mind, is to interrupt me if I've started monologuing in an overly enthusiastic way. You're like, Michael, calm down, settle back,
your
and move on to the next thing.
enthusiasm is an issue.
Yeah.
In there.
So the starting point for this is like, if you think that you'd like the best possible relationship with the people with whom you're working with, the key tactic that I'm offering up in this book is have a conversation about how you work together before you get pulled into the work itself. And the tug of the work is strong. It's always there. It's urgent. It's important. It's shiny. It's a crisis. There's always a reason for you to get into the stuff about the work. And I'm saying, why don't you just look the other person in the eye and go, before we get onto the work, or let's take a break from the work and talk about how you and I work together. And these 5 questions are meant to offer a structure to kind of go talk about these things. So the first question, just as you said, the amplify question. And the question is, what's your best? Now, that's actually a slightly awkward question, but I wanted it to not feel like, what are you good at? Which is less interesting, because certainly when you get to a certain age, certainly my age, I'm like, I'm good at a whole bunch of things, none of which I ever want to do again. So I don't want to tell you what I'm good at. And it's not what are your strengths or what are your values, because I find that a little abstract. People have done Strength Finder and I hear my 5 strengths. I'm like, that's interesting, but I don't know what to do with that. Right. I want to know, when do you shine and when do you flow? So, that flow state from Michael Csikszentmihalyi, I think is how you pronounce his Hungarian's name.
Csikszentmihalyi.
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 Hi, Csikszentmihalyi.
He told me how to say his name, otherwise I'd never know.
Perfect. Hi, Csikszentmihalyi. Perfect. That flow state where you're in the time speeds up and slows down, and you're like, this is it. What's that? And when do you shine is when do other people see you in that zone, when your eyes light up, when you're kind of in that moment. And this is a great question to start with, because it draws on all the stuff we know, positive, appreciative inquiry, positive psychology, positive deviance, all of those change models, which are like amplify the good rather than focusing on what's broken. And so here, like, imagine you and I, Carol, let's imagine you and I co-authoring a book together. And we're sitting down and I'm like, we could get really excited about the topic of the book because we're both coaching geeks and we both like this sort of stuff and we both like teaching, and we could just be into the ideas. But if instead I went, what's it like for us to work together, Carol? Tell me about who you are at your best. And I'm like, I'm this and I'm that and I'm the other. And I'm like, that's really helpful to know. Because I've invented this whole mythology about the legendary Carol Kauffman. I'm already made up.
It's all true.
It's all true. And I want to tell you me at my best, so you can get a sense of, how do I bring out the best in Michael? And I'm like, how do I bring out the best in Carol? How does this get us working together? So that's the first question, the amplify question. What's your best?
I love that. And what I like about it is you don't go on and on about it, but it's a very evidence-based question.
Right.
As you've said, and there's a lot of research about your best possible self and the power of writing that down and saying it. So I love that. But let's go to steady. That's the next set of questions.
The steady question is, what are your practices and preferences? So this is really the kind of the mechanics of how you work. And the idea I got for this, Carol, comes from, particularly I think in Silicon Valley, there's this idea of a README document. You're like, okay, I'm just going to type out all the things you need to know about me, and I'm going to send it out, and then that should make our working relationships great. And I'm like, I love that you're writing out all the things about you, but just sending them an email about it, that is not going to work. Nobody's going to read it. Nobody's going to remember it. But it is really helpful to have an exchange around just what are the ways you best work mechanically. Everything from morning person, afternoon person, email person, or a Zoom person, or a chat person, a conversation about how you like feedback, conversation about how meetings work, even a conversation about what's your name, what are your pronouns. Those are new things that we've talked about in the last few years. But, as an example, my name is Michael Bungay Stania. It is a mouthful. When I got married, I took my wife's surname and became Bungay Stania, which I'm I'm thrilled about, but it freaks people out. But here's the thing, Carol, it annoys me immensely when people call me Mike.
How about Mikey? Does Mikey work?
Well, Mikey also I'm not a big fan of, but I probably prefer
Okay.
Mikey to Mike. Mike, I'm like,
really?
that is not my name. My name is Michael. And I want to tell people that right at the start. So that
so otherwise you don't feel like.
Yeah, because when somebody starts calling me Mike, if I've missed the moment to correct them, then they're calling me Mike for the rest of my life. And every single time I'm like, this is irritating me. So we get to just have that exchange around what do we need to know about our working patterns?
It's almost like giving someone your kind of operating manual.
Exactly.
This is how I like the nuts and bolts of working with me. Like you need to know, for example, with you and me, you need to know, listen, I don't want to be, I try not to be, but I am frequently late. So let's figure out how to work with that. I'm very creative. So it's like, but like, what's your, your 2-page operating manual?
That's right. And in fact, I love that you're saying that, because the original title for the book was The Operating Manual. So it was literally that. Yeah, exactly. I know. But then I came up with How to Work with Almost Anyone. I'm like, that is a really good title. This is my best book title.
The almost part is brilliant. That's really brilliant.
Well, everybody laughs and smiles when they say this title. So I'm like, as you know, Carol, because you've written books as well. Most often when you write a book, you write the book and then you search for the title that is like somehow tells the problem, hints at the solution, is intriguing and compelling, all in 5 words or less. So it's really hard.
And one word, if you can get away with that.
Exactly. But with this, I was like, I've got a really good title. Now I have to write a book that kind of matches the title. But anyway, that's the second question, which is the steady question, which is, what are your practices and preferences? Then the third and the fourth question are kind of sister questions or cousin questions. It's the good date and the bad date question. So the good date question is, what can we learn from past successful relationships? And the bad date question is, what can we learn from past frustrating relationships? Because one of the things that I can promise is that the patterns from the past will repeat again in the future. Absolutely 100% guaranteed. So don't pretend that they won't, but have a conversation about, look, when I worked with somebody like you and we kind of had this type of relationship and it was fantastic, let me tell you what happened. Let me tell you what they did and didn't do and what they said and didn't say. And let me tell you how I contributed, what I did and didn't do and said and didn't say. Let me give you all the clues I can about what makes magic work. And I want to hear it from you as well. I mean, this is a key part of this, Carol.
Yes.
Part of the roots of this come from the work of Peter Block. And he calls this work social contracting.
That's right.
Social contracting for me, I mean, it's a bit of a abstract phrase, but what I love about the insight around contracting is a contract in legal terms is an exchange of value. So you can't just ask these questions, you have to answer them as well. You have to give and take.
Right. And there's research about that in terms of mutuality. So if the other person is a little more reluctant to share, if you share, first you ask them, but if they don't, you share, and then it brings out more sharing capacity in the other.
Well, that's right. So every time you're into this conversation, Carol, you have a choice around how much, how vulnerable, how open do I want to be? And often what you're trying to figure out is the context. And often that's like, what's the power relationship between me and this other person?
Yeah.
And for most people, the people they're going to feel most comfortable doing this with are either, in the case of coaches, potential clients or prospects, going, how do we work best together? But if you're in the organizational world, it's probably people on your team.
Yeah, right.
If you're the person that holds the balance of power, then the invitation is for you to be as brave and as vulnerable as possible, because what you role model as the extent of vulnerability is what the other person will feel comfortable doing. So the braver you are around being human and messy and true and honest and all of that gives permission for the other people to do that as well.
And you know what I've just been thinking about also is, I know you talk in the book and about how it can feel awkward Sorry, I'm being attacked by the sun here. I have to move back. Um, but also that this doesn't have to be one conversation.
Right.
This can be multiple conversations. It can be woven into other kind of onboarding,
That's right.
relationship building things. I like, though, having the 5 of them in the structure. So amplify, steady, nuts and bolts.
Yeah. Good date,
Good
bad
date.
date.
What did I really learn
Yeah.
from, past relationships, and what that worked and that didn't work?
Yeah.
And then let's talk about the repair one. I think you have a lot to say about that.
Yeah. It's the probably of safe, vital, and repairable. Repairable is the one that fewest people feel comfortable with. But this question works on 2 levels. The first is there's something immensely powerful about asking, how will we fix it when things go wrong? And it's
Mhm.
powerful in 2 ways. The first is the we. How will we fix this?
Yeah, wait.
So there's this kind of shared responsibility to say the health of this relationship rests between the 2 of us. How will we fix it? The second thing is there's an implicit commitment to we will fix it when things go wrong. So there's this call to action to say, look, it will go wrong. First of all,
Yeah.
it just says it will go wrong. I promise you it will go wrong. But let's talk about how we might fix it when things do go wrong. And honestly, people will often struggle a little bit to talk about how they do this, particularly in the first times they run this conversation, because they don't have a lot of data to pull on. But there's just something powerful about acknowledging that it will go wrong and that we will try and fix it. When I learned this from Peter Block, he said, the things that you don't talk about in this conversation are the things you can never talk about in this conversation. So if you're a coach, for instance, part of his guidance, or at least how I interpret his guidance, is you got to have a conversation about how the money works in this kind of first, that how will we work together piece? Because if you don't talk about how the money works, then there's never a moment where you can talk about how the money works. And so the money becomes an awkward thing between you. And what you're trying to do is set this up to be as clean and as clear as possible.
Let me tell you what's hitting me right now, though, as
Yeah.
you're talking. I love that. It's like the good date, the bad date, and repair. And I would think, like, how do you ease into the repair conversation?
Yeah.
And I think there's sort of like it's sort of a question for 4C or 5A, which is what's worked when you've repaired relationships in the past?
Yes, exactly.
So it's like good date, bad date. How were you able to fix things, and then how can we fix things? I'm just
You're right.
putting that
That's
together.
exactly right, because these questions are a kind of a catalyst for a conversation. It's like, it's not ask the question once, get a single answer, and then move on. It's like, let's get curious about this. Let's get into this. When I think about repair, I often think there are 3 core actions that you can take that can be helpful to make relationships more repairable.
Yeah.
First is to speak up when you've been hurt. Because so often.
Can I say something about this?
Yeah, please.
Sorry. I did put this in my book, that our rule of thumb to speak up is you speak up when something is so horrible that your head is going to explode and I just can't take it anymore. That's when I speak up. That's the rule of thumb.
That's a good rule of thumb. I like that.
New rule of thumb.
Yeah.
I speak up. You and I are working together and you do something and it makes me withdraw.
Yes.
That's when you have to do the repair conversation.
That's what I love about that. And one of the things that it's taken me a long, long time to learn, so I'm saying this hoping that other people learn faster than I do, is I talk about the small things earlier on. I don't need to make a big deal about it. I don't even need to repair it. I just go, this thing, I'd rather this than that, please. Rather than what I've done for most of my life is kind of go, I'll just pretend that didn't happen. I'll just swallow that. Maybe that was a one-off. And I'm like, I've just learned to speak up when something is slightly off. So that's the first thing, which is to speak up when something is slightly off. The second is to build the capacity to be curious if you think something might be off. You might not even totally be sure what's happening. I know because I have two companies that I started, so I'm often the person with the balance of power in these conversations. I'm often the founder or the senior person. So I regularly ask the people with whom I work what needs to be said that hasn't yet been said, to give them an opportunity and a safe space to mention the thing that is hard to say or is brewing or they might not yet quite have all the words for. I want to give them the space for that. And then the third element, and I'd love to hear your take on this, is knowing how to say sorry well. No,
Ah,
not doing that kind of sleazy fake apology, which isn't saying, which is basically saying, I'm sorry, you're a loser. But also not going too far where you're like, I'm going to take responsibility for everything that went wrong and kind of becoming the victim of the moment. But being able to say
mhm,
with a clarity, I did this, I can see what was wrong, I can see the impact it had, I'll do all I can to not make that happen again.
mhm, mhm. But part of what I see about that is I think there's a big dividing line, which is when people take responsibility versus when they don't. Like, I'm sorry you feel that way
Right.
is either an excuse or a defense.
Yeah.
It's not, I've taken responsibility for hurting you.
Yeah.
That was not my intention, but I can really see how I did that. And
Yeah.
I won't do that again. And I love somebody once talked about it is the word is response dash ability.
Nice. The line that I am trying to figure out with this, Carol, is a friend of mine said you're responsible for your side of the table,
Mm-hmm.
and how easy it is to take responsibility for their side of the table, and how disempowering that can be in for yourself and for the other person as well. So
Yeah.
there are times where I might go, I can see you're angry and I can see you're sad, and I can really acknowledge that. And I'm really clear that my actions were the right actions to take. And I'm
Mhm.
actually, how you feel is part of your side of the table. Part of my responsibility is my actions and my intentions and my integrity around that. And that is a
Mhm.
hard thing to navigate because I want to make the other person feel better, but I also don't want to apologize for something that actually was the right thing to do if that's what needs to happen.
Yeah, and there's a way of avoiding taking responsibility by taking too much responsibility
Yes,
because it's not reality based. Like, oh, I know, I just always do this, and I'm so sorry, and like,
love that.
and you're actually weaponizing your big apology. You take so much responsibility
Yeah,
that it
really.
blurs.
That's a
Now,
really good insight.
I'm rather horrified to see that we only have like 2 minutes left. Um, Do you have just some advice for our coaches? Because the people listening to us are successful coaches, many
Yeah.
with their own companies. How can they use this? How can they contact you?
Thank you. The final piece I would add probably in this is to, if this resonates or you think there might be something here for you, be the person who reaches out, be the person who starts this. Somebody
Mm,
said to me the other day, nobody likes to be the first person to say hello, but everybody loves to be greeted. And
yes.
there is an unusualness to this, perhaps an awkwardness to this at times, but if you're the person who's willing to start this, that is a great gift
Mhm.
to them, but also to you and
Mm,
to us in terms of how that
right.
works. And
That's
then
right.
if you'd like to see me role model a Keystone conversation or download the 5 questions,
Yeah.
bestpossiblerelationship.com is the website for the book and also where you can pick up the bonuses.
Oh, that's right. Oh, and guys, there's a lot of bonuses when you get the book, and I have it on here. There's these QR codes that can sort of
That's
take
right.
you places
That's right.
where there's like summaries at the end of every chapter. It's very where Michael lives is where the rubber meets the road. Psychological safety, great. How do I do it today with someone in real time is kind of where you live.
Yeah.
So it said best possible
.com.
relationship.com.
You got it.
And also, if you Google Michael, I mean, there's like 50,000 pages, but you probably also find your way.
Yes.
Um, so, listen, Michael,
Carol.
thank you. Thank you so much
It
for.
was so nice. I love hanging out with you. We do it on camera occasionally, but off camera quite a lot. And it's
Mhm.
always a pleasure. You know, you're I feel pretty happy being in your orbit and being associated with Carol Kauffman, and I appreciate the work you do in this coaching world as well. So thank you.
You are welcome. And also, everybody, Michael lives this. You know, when before we talked, it's like, so like, how do you want to do this together? And he was like, so listen, you know, interrupt me. And you heard he even said that again. So there's ways you can do this like in little drops
That's
as
right.
well, and kind of not just keep it in your first conversation, but have it be in your mind in all conversations. So again, Michael, thank you.
Thanks, Carol.
This has been wonderful. And guys, next month, come visit the first Wednesday at high noon Eastern of September, where I'll be talking with Professor Ellen Langer, the first female professor at Harvard in their psychology department.
Very cool.